so that anyone that can't attend today will get the recording of this. And of course, if you want to watch this back, because some of the examples might run through a bit quickly and you want to go back and try it out, then you'll, as long as you've registered, whether you attend or not, you'll get the recording. So that's all good. I shall introduce you to myself and also my esteemed colleague who I have with me alongside me today. We'll get there in a second. How to ask your questions through Zoom. And then we'll look at the main content itself. So we're going to have a look at the reporting, all the templates and the basics of their use. And then I'll dive live into the platform and create an overtime report in the custom report builder and a report on training as well. Then we'll look at a different way of getting your data out of Deputy via the timesheet export page, and also a couple of tips using Excel pivot tables to maybe arrange your data in a simpler format or in a more customized way that's more useful for you. And also the timesheet history export from the timesheet export page is perhaps not known that it's there, and it can be really useful to find some historical clocking information. And finally, we'll have a look at the Deputy Exporter tool. Now, this is perhaps a bit of an untapped resource, but it really is going one extra step into the detail of data that you can extract from the system. So we'll have a brief look at that. And at the end, if there's time, Dave and I shall cover off any more Q&A. All right. So, deputies for today. Now, we have the wondrous, the wizard of deputy data, Mr. David Kidd. Now, if there's something about the inner workings of the deputy system that Dave doesn't know, then it's not worth knowing. Dave is going to be largely on mute today, not because we don't want to hear his dulcet voice, but he's got a really loud keyboard, so we don't want.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I don't want to distract from Gary's wonderful show. So please, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask, and I will answer them silently. Yes.
So I know I asked a question in the chat box, but now it's if you want to ask actual questions about the content that we're going to run through, please do use the Q&A box, which I'll show you in a second. So that's Dave, and then myself, Gary Harper, technical learning designer. So I help design content for learning technical things like this. All right. So let's move on. The Q&A. All right. So you should find at the bottom of your Zoom window the Q&A feature. So this is where you can type it in, and Dave will furiously respond as quickly as possible, and we'll send out any extra Q&A that didn't get answered. We'll make sure that we get back to you to answer your questions afterwards. Classic. All right, let's begin. Now I'm going to start with a bit of video content, and then I'll jump in and out with some live demonstrations as well. Here we go. Hi there, Gary Harper here from Deputy UK, and welcome to the Reporting 101 webinar. The reports you have access to depends on the subscription plan you have. In the scheduling only plan, you'll notice when you click on the Reports tab, you're advised you'll need Deputy Premium to gain access. However, should you need to simply export some total hours and planned costs data, you can still export this directly from the schedule page itself. Select the data you'd like to export in terms of the location or particular area and date range, and click Export. The export options list will be slightly different depending on the view type that you have selected. You can download the shifts data with hours and costs information directly in a listed CSV format. Or if you prefer to export as it looks on screen, then choose one of the print types which you can print directly or save a local Excel or PDF file first. On the timesheets only plan, you do have access to the Reports tab, but you'll find just two simple reports available, as they are based on timesheet functionality, journaling, which again I'll cover in depth shortly, as well as an overview of timesheet clock-in locations, also covered later. On this plan, you have no access to scheduling features, but a wealth of export options in the timesheet section. Deputy Premium certainly offers the best value, where you have exclusive access to an advanced collection of standard and fully customizable and exportable reports. If, after discovering how much you could benefit from accessing these, it's simple to upgrade to Premium through the billing section in your profile, so long as you are a system admin on your account. Remember, the monthly plans don't tie you in, so you can always revert back to your original choice if need be. In Deputy Premium, you have 7 standard report templates, each of which can be clicked into to expand and delve into more detail. Note that only system administrators and location managers can access the Reports tab by default. You can track many important details regarding your staff's performance, including their availability, rostered hours, journal history, and personal details. At the top of each report is a printer icon, in case you would prefer to have physical copies for your records. The Employee Details report shows basic information about each employee, including work locations, birthdays, age, tenure, contact details, and activity. After running the report, each section can be accessed by selecting the relevant checkbox. This can be useful to see who has missing vital information, who has a birthday this month, who is less than 6 months in their business, for example. And you can save each of these as a PDF before printing if required. Now, I'm just going to pause the video there because you can now actually download as a CSV. Let me go over to my one here. The Employee Details has a new button where you can download CSV. So really handy. If sometimes we get asked, how do I get all of my employee data, well, at least the simpler side of things, name and contact information, for example, like this. Off of the system. Here you go. Now you can download it as a CSV straight off of here. One other thing that's slightly different since I made this video is that we now have another report template. So I mentioned that there was 7 there, but there's actually 8 now, because obviously we have a contact tracing report. Now this is a pretty straightforward report. You can indeed choose a date range, run the report which shows who worked throughout that date range, if it's a specific day, or I've just got a month here selected. Then you can choose an employee. So perhaps if you know there's a poorly colleague, let's say Dodgy Dave with dripping in COVID, we can go filter to the area. So in this date range, we know that Dave Kidd, who's tested positive, has been in contact with these guys, and we can also export this as a CSV. So it's simple but an effective extra report there. All right, I'm going to go back to the Deputy journaling is a great way to leave comments on team member performance that you and other authorized managers can view. In the journal usage report, you can track how many positive, negative, or other labeled comments that each employee has accumulated and report on any trends. You can use this data over time to identify consistently high-performing team members, as well as staff who may need extra support and mentoring. The journal categories are customizable, so please reach out to the support team should you want to add to these with your own unique labels. Adding a journal entry can be done directly via the employee's profile. Via the People tab, search for the employee, then click their name to open their profile, where you'll find journals on the left-hand side. Click Add New to create a new date-stamped entry and add it to the relevant category before pressing Save. Recent journal entries appear in this area, but for the bigger picture, head to the Journal report through the Main Reports tab to filter by date, category, and employee name. You can also add entries at the timesheet approval stage, the perfect time to capture a late entry for future reference, or if there's a comment particular to that shift that's fresh in the mind. So when it comes to appraisals, one-to-ones, you're armed with plenty of feedback. It's important to add that journal entries cannot be seen by the employee access level, and no one can see entries about themselves. The Leave Management Report is also covered in more detail in the specific Leave Management webinar, which is also available to view in this UK Deputy video training library, which I'm going to link to at the end of this webinar. The Leave Management dashboard displays a snapshot of leave and allows you to action modifications to leave balance. You can see leave accruals in this dashboard too, and it's divided into 3 sections. So we have leave balance, the employee's current leave balance, approved leave, the total amount of leave as approved in the future. This applies only for future leave requests and not leave which has already been taken. Leave remaining is how much leave the employee has minus their approved leave. So it's the leave balance minus approved leave. You can filter to view leave remaining for employees with a certain leave type and filter further by whether they are entitled to that leave entitlement or not, or both. You can also click on the headers of the columns to sort highest to lowest and vice versa. To edit an employee's leave, first set a filter based on the leave type you would like to modify. Leave requests will appear in the report on the right side of the screen. Clicking the employee name will open up their profile. However, clicking the leave date range will open up the request, allowing you to approve or decline the request. The report builder, which we'll cover in more detail, has a helpful approved leave this year template showing exactly that. Once you select to load the report, you will see a summary report which you can select to edit. The report is pre-filtered to show you all of the approved leave this calendar year as of the time you open it. It will also show you each leave request for each employee and the hours you have approved for them. If you need to, you can use the filter button to edit the date range of the report, depending on the time frame you'd like to consider. You could also add or remove fields as necessary. I'd like to see the leave comments at the time of request. So simply search for the field you'd like to add, then drag it into the section here. Now we can even group by leave type or status, as well as employee name. We can run this report to see it in full, or export it as an Excel file to manipulate further with filters. The Deputy Custom Report Builder allows you to create custom reports based on any bit of retrievable data in Deputy. On my dashboard here, you can see I've saved a few I made earlier for easy future access. These reports are saved into my login and will only be viewable by others if I export them first. In the first instance, you can choose whether to create a report based on a template, or if you click the header, you'll be taken straight into the editor where there's a few things to consider. Let's start by covering exactly what's on screen here. So the main window holds the fields in columns. These can be resized and rearranged by clicking between to expand and retract, and clicking and dragging to change the order. The fields available are initially based on which primary data source is selected, and then searchable from the search box. You can then click and drag another field over, which will place it at the end of the group. You can also remove fields by clicking the X. At the top left, we have a configuration section. This has 2 parts to it. Firstly, the filter, also accessible above the first column, which allows you to refine the data by your chosen criteria. For example, a specific date range, location, and many other options. The second part is grouping. This is where we can group by several fields too, such as employee name, area name, and loads more. Alongside the configuration menu, we have options for loading previous saved reports, saving new ones, refreshing the page, and exporting or printing what's on screen. We often get asked, what kinds of reports do customers find most useful? So let's load up a late report to use as an example. Click Load, then choose one to open. Here we can see this report is using timesheet information as its primary data source, which makes sense as we're looking at the source of truth. What start and end times staff have clocked, so we can compare that to what was originally scheduled to spot and collate the late entries. I'll start from fresh by removing all of the fields. The quickest way to add fields is to type what you're looking for in the search box. I'll start with employee name, then the timesheet date so we can filter by date range. Then I want to see the scheduled start time, followed by the actual timesheet clocking information. To focus on the late arrivals, we'll add a calculation field here and select late arrival from the menu. This will show which timesheets have a later start than scheduled. Click Save, and we can now see some of these timesheets were late arrivals. Then we can go further by adding another calculation field to determine how late in minutes each shift was. This does require a more complex calculation, but it's straightforward to copy and paste from the Deputy Help Guide. So if you head to deputy.com/help and simply search for the late report, here you'll find the calculation details to copy and then paste into this area. Hit Save, and now we can see the number of minutes some timesheets were over their planned start time. Now it's just a case of adding a filter to focus on just the late ones. Click Filter and choose the Late Arrival field. Is equal to Yes. Finally, let's group by employee. Click Configuration, Group by, Display Name. There we go. This can be an extremely insightful report. If you're not tracking repeated lateness or timesheets are approved carelessly, over time you could be overpaying your staff significantly for time not being spent working. You could create a similar report for late clockouts to discover how much unauthorized overtime is being paid. The odd few minutes here and there truly do add up. For example, if you pay by the hour and just 3 employees at £10 an hour are just 15 minutes late to work twice a week, and 3 others clock out 15 minutes after the scheduled end time, that amounts to £1,200 per year in time theft. And that's what Deputy costs for 40 users for 12 months on an annual plan. So insight into your staff data using Deputy is very powerful and pays for itself very quickly. Another often requested report is around sick leave. Let's create a new one from scratch. This time we'll start by choosing leave as the primary data source. There's not much to change from the defaults here. All leave types are showing, so let's add a filter where we can choose any leave types that contain the word sick in their title. Also, I'll add a filter to the date range, so I'm focusing on sick leave from the start of the year. Back on the main reports page, you can see your dashboard will show your 4 most recent saved reports for easy access, but you'll find more in the load section in the report builder itself. The report builder is extremely flexible and gives you the opportunity to drill down in detail, highlighting anomalies or patterns that aren't obvious in the day-to-day. The schedule versus timesheet versus sales report. This report gives you a relatively comprehensive financial guide on employee costs in comparison to sales. You can view these by location, date range, and employee. The schedule versus timesheets versus sales report will allow you to compare your total sales in a given period versus the rostered hours of your employees, shown against the hours that they actually worked. In the short overview on the reports page, you'll be able to see a graph displaying the data from your current week. The blue column shows the total number of rostered hours, the green shows the number of hours actually worked, and the orange line shows your sales data. Clicking View Report allows us to dig into more detail. I'd like to see how the front of house team are being allocated and performing on Monday the 10th. What we can see here is the totals of scheduled hours, actual worked and approved hours, the difference, then the total cost planned versus actual paid, what was salary allocated and overall cost variance, and finally, the day's sales amount and wages versus sales percentage. The graph above is helpful to see if there are any obvious issues. For example, here I can see a sales dip in the mid to late afternoon, so I could probably afford to have 1 or 2 fewer staff members scheduled at this time to maximize profits. The Time Off and Schedules report is a handy team holiday and work planner. The overview is a quick glance into who's available and who's working this week. The full report allows you to drill down by location, date range, and employee. Here I'd like to see who had leave booked or unavailability at Erdsley Manor in January this year. Displayed on the report will be your employees' unavailability, approved leave, and scheduled shifts. If you click the Show All Employees button, all staff who have relevant information within your selected time period will be shown. This report can then be saved as a PDF and shared in the newsfeed for all staff to see. Employee timesheet locations. The timesheet location report will pull up a map displaying all of the locations. Each location will have a pin. The pins can be 4 different colours and will correspond with the following. Red pin is the physical location. Green pin is the employee clock-in location. Black pin is the employee clock-out location if they were on time. And the blue pin is the employee activity outside of the scheduled time. So clock-offs and breaks. That covers all the reports in the actual reports section. Okay, I'm going to pause the video there. There was a lot of information to take in there, largely based around the templated reports here. There's been a few questions about information that's not really covered in this webinar that maybe relates to leave and sales data, and now there are specific video guides for those very topics, so I'll make sure that I'll link to those in the follow-up after this. There's a couple of extra reports I'd like to dive into now and create live here for you. There's an overtime report I'd like to show you, and also a training report. So one question I get quite often is, how can I report on how many overtime hours have been worked? And of course, well, how you set this up depends on your individual overtime rules. But let me share one example I had recently where a business had a rule that any day's work that exceeds 10 hours is overtime. So anything over and above 10 hours is overtime. So they need to see how many hours equal that. So what I'll do is we'll come into Report Builder here. We're going to create a new report, and we'll base it on timesheet data. And I'm going to start from scratch here, really. Well, we can just get rid of some of these to start with. You can just click on the blue box to get rid of them. Display name we'll keep, and we're going to use the search box here. I'm going to look for the total time. So timesheet total time. All right, so we've got 539 results here, total hours clocked as approved timesheets. The next one I want to get is, oh, actually the first one I should have done is the timesheet date. So when you add one here, you can reorder them. So I'm just going to put this in between the name and the total hours. Now I only want the ones that are over and above 10 hours. So we'll add a filter here to the total time. So click on filters and then timesheet total time. And then we'll say is greater than 10. Now this should reduce those numbers down. Yep, so we've only got 26 results now. So all of these are over 10 hours. And that's great, but we want to know how many hours over 10. So we want to know what the overtime hours are. So in order to get that, we're going to add a really simple calculation field here. So we click on here. We'll give this a name. We'll say this is overtime hours. The data type is going to be a number. And then we just need to do a simple equation. So what we need is the timesheet. Well, actually, first of all, we want to put equals the timesheet total time minus 10. So anything over and above 10 minus 10, that gives us the overtime hours. So we'll click save, and then we'll have a column here, overtime hours. So all of these are the number of hours that are over and above 10. Pretty straightforward, right? But then now you can see we've got their individual timesheets. So what we want to do is group these in a way. Now, you can do that in WT, but you can't sum a calculation field, like a custom column here. So what we do, we're going to export this as a CSV. Now you can see this very quickly downloads a CSV file. So we're going to click this, open this in Excel. And I'm going to run a really simple pivot table just to group these individual timesheets. So insert, pivot table. We can leave the range selection here. You can see it's guest hour range of data. And we're going to put it on a new worksheet. Yep, that's fine. So now you can see it's added an extra sheet here. And these are our fields. So we want display name in rows. I'm going to click and drag that down there. Zoom in a bit here. And the overtime hours as values. Here we go. So it's just summed them all nice and neatly there. So we know in that date range that I exported out of Deputy, we've got each person's hours that are over and above 10 in total. There we go, easy. All right, the next one I'd like to show you. Oh, before I go on to the next one, what I'll mention is, in the video, when it was recorded, this feature wasn't here, which is that you can share reports across accounts now. So as long as people have the correct access level, excuse me, in Deputy, you'll be able to share the reports. So handy. Anyway, let's do a training report. So this time I'm going to go to primary data source and choose training. Because quite often it's good to know if you've put a training tag on someone that has a start and an end date, there is indeed an integration that you can enable in Deputy that will notify you if a training expiry date is coming up. But if you'd like a quick glance to see which of my staff have expiring training, for example, a first aid certificate this month, for example. So the default training is just going to spit out all the training tags for my team. Now I'm going to get rid of some of these columns that I don't need. Expiry date. So I want to know how many have an expiry date this month. We'll filter the date range, and we're going to say the expiry date this month. There we go. And I can see Natalia here has first aid that's due to expire today. All right. Well, if you're gonna get sick, make sure it's today, and make sure you go and see Natalia. There we go. Okay. So let's now go back into the video for the last time to take a look at some timesheet exports. Back in a minute. More detailed timesheet reports can also be created and exported in the Timesheets Export section. So let's take a look at that now. From the Timesheet drop-down menu in the navigation bar, you will also see the option to export timesheets. The following screen will show a number of details, including a pay summary and employee breakdown. To export these timesheets, select the employee timesheets that you want to export from the list on the left-hand side, then click the blue Export Selected Items button under the item summary. From here, you are given a large number of export options. For the UK, realistically, you'll only ever choose one or two of them. If you're after a simple total hours and total cost, there's two options you may find useful. The first is to select everything required, then click More Actions at the top right, click Print Selected Items, then select Full Summary with Pay Breakdown, and the last option is up to you, but not too important. This opens this data in a print preview. So you could print this directly, or alternatively, we can press Ctrl or Command A to select everything, then Ctrl or Command C to copy it all. Go to a blank worksheet in Excel and hit Ctrl or Command V to paste everything into the spreadsheet. The second way is, once the relevant information in Deputy is selected, you can click Export and choose the CSV All Fields option. Upon downloading and opening this in Excel, it can be information overload when all we want is simple totals. So we can make a very quick pivot table. Click Insert, select Pivot Table, and accept the default settings. On the right, we'll choose the employee name to be in rows, then total hours and total cost as values. This gives us simple totals per person and as a whole. Now, I know what you're thinking. Those two examples are kind of workarounds. So I'm going to show you a new option now, which I think a lot of people are going to find really useful. It's called the Custom Payroll Exporter. Select your timesheets as usual, and then search for and choose the new Custom Exporter from the menu. Here you're presented with a stock list of fully editable fields which can be reordered, renamed, and exported in a variety of specific formats that perhaps your particular payroll software may require. To start with, we'll start from scratch. I'll keep this one simple. First name, last name, payroll, which I'm going to rename to something more familiar, like pay rate type, total hours, and total cost. Final thing to remember is to click Settings and click Group by Payroll Hours/Cost. So this is going to summarize all the different individual pay rates into one line per person. Click Apply, and then the final thing to do is click Export and Save. Upon saving and exporting this, we're presented with a clear, concise export with the totals for each pay rate per person, easy to sum as a whole with Control or Command, Shift and T beneath each column. And there we have it. And there we have it. Mr. Cheese there on the video. Right, so back live in the system now, we'll have a look at a couple of different options with that custom payroll exporter. So let's go to the timesheet export page, and I have a month's worth of timesheets here. I'm going to click Export Selected Items. And yes, we'll go to Custom Payroll Exporter. Now, I know we've just seen this in the video. One thing to point out that's really cool that I failed to mention in the video is when you've created this CSV type with the fields of your choice, it will remember that order and how you've titled them. So if you're really happy with it, each time that you come to do your export, you can just go to this, which will be pre-selected if it was the last one that you chose, and it will remember the settings, so you can just click export and that's it. But if we just dive into the edits here, remember you can move these around. You can title them as well. There's a fair bit here you can do. You can search for extra things, but one I've added in here is leave total hours, and I've renamed things to just be a little bit more familiar. So let's export and save this now. This will generate the CSV file for us to download. Now that's done, I'll download this to my desktop and open it up. Here we go. Now this time we've got all the different pay rates, and something I get asked fairly often is on an export, people would like to see how many hours someone has done at each of their different rates, especially if they have different area rates, or different rates per day of the week as well. It's good to know, how many hours have been done for each in a given time frame. So this is the outcome of the deputy one, but you can still, it's still putting, because these are different rate types or they're in different areas, it's put them on different lines. So we want this more concise. So once again, we're going to use the good old pivot table. We'll click in. Let's just make this screen a bit bigger. Let's go up a bit. There we go. Pivot table is under Insert. We're going to have a new worksheet. Oh, we need to select the range. I think that's everything. You can just click and drag. If it doesn't, most of the time it automatically knows where everything is, but if for some reason it doesn't, you can just click and drag to cover all of the data you want to be analysed. Click OK, and then, yep, we've got it on the new worksheet here. So once again, we'll put display name in the rows. And this time, underneath each person, I'm going to put their pay rate. There we go. So let's actually zoom up a little bit. it here. So you can see under each person, they're going to get their own totals for each pay rate here. So what we'll do now is we can put in the total hours as values. So now we have how many hours Amy has done, at each rate, and the total in line with her name, and broken down per pay rate type there. You can actually take this one step further as well if you'd like to see which area that rate is associated with. Then we could also put the area the area worked underneath as a row as well. Now you might not like this; is starting to look maybe a bit too busy, and you may not like this. This might be information overload. So you can just untick that one if you don't need to know that. But sometimes it's good to know, how many hours has someone worked in this area, or especially if you use your areas like for training or for one-to-ones or for completely different types of work, can be quite useful. But we'll untick that now and keep it a bit cleaner. And another one we can add in is the total leave hours. So I'm going to put that as a column. There we go. So now we can see how many hours were of these that are worked are leave, and what pay rate are they against. So we have the leave hours here. So Amy gets her leave paid at her regular weekday rate. And then of course we can just put total pay in the values under the timesheet hours here. There we go. And what we'll do, just to finish this off nicely, we'll base this data in currency, just so it looks a bit more realistic. So now we can see the total leave hours and the cost for that, the total timesheet hours and the costs associated with those, all in one nice clean file. All right. Pretty handy, pretty handy. Right, let me go back to the deputy. Now there's one more export type I'd like to show you. When we click selected items here, again, this is just based on customer feedback. A question we get asked pretty often is, I'd really like to see the original clocking in and out times that an employee does, because we do have a setting that you can enable which automatically rounds up. So I'll just quickly show you. In location settings, under the timesheets tab, we do have some auto rounding features. Now this is really useful and saves you loads of time, especially if you pay dead to the hour or half an hour or whatever, and you don't want to have to constantly be manually changing the clock-in times to be to those fixed numbers. If you do have any of these on, bearing in mind it can be something that might get missed if a manager goes to approve a timesheet and then a subsequent manager comes to have a look and see, well, what time did John clock in Wednesday morning? It may have already been approved and automatically rounded. Now, there is timesheet history, but on the actual timesheet approval page, which is here, but it's probably not the trying to find one that actually has some history. It would be helpful. Here we go. But it may not be the easiest thing to read, and especially if you want to see several timesheets in one go, and what their clock-in times were. This isn't the easiest way to do it, perhaps. So let me get to the point now. There is an export type on the timesheet export page. Let's go to some timesheets. If you type in here, timesheet, here you go. Timesheet CSV with history audit. So this will indeed have the original clocking in and out times per timesheet, per person that you select here. Now this might be a lot of data, so maybe if you're suspicious of Dodgy Dave Kid again and is really late to clock in times, then I thought you were on mute. I thought I hard coded your mute button, but you seem to have cracked it. Yeah, then that's a really handy export to use. So it's the timesheet CSV with history audit. Okay, right, we're onto the final section now. Let's take a look at the Deputy Data Exporter. Now, there is another more in-depth web app which will locate and extract some of the deeper layers of your Deputy account history and employee activity as CSV files. Now, generally, this will only ever be accessed by system admins on the account. So don't worry about security. You know, if the link to this exporter gets into the wrong hands or to the employees or whatever, the information that you can extract from this is limited by your Deputy access level. I think that's correct. Dave, can you just confirm that?
Correct. Yes. So this one is admins only.
Now, in order to find the data tool, the Deputy Exporter tool, there is a URL for it here. Now, I'm going to link everything that we've talked about today. So all links to training, all links to help guides, and of course the exporter tool. So I recommend that you save it as a favorite if you're going to be using this. But there is a guide as to how to initially enable it, okay, to connect it with your account and then decide which data you want to extract. Using the exporter tool is pretty straightforward. So once you've authorized it, you'll get this screen here. So it'll ask you to choose your source, a couple of other filters. So at first glance, it might seem a bit complex, but this is a full guide on how to use the tool, which I will include in the follow-up after the webinar. But there are some that are worth a quick look. Now, we'll connect this with my account, and hopefully this will work. Of course, I left it a while, so it's logged me out, so just bear with me. Oh, the wondrous live demo experience. Bear with me. Okay, so you choose your Deputy account, click Authorize, and then you are presented with the selection list here. Right. Now, there are several sources of data that you can choose from here. Now, don't be put off by how many there are here. We'll just touch on probably the most useful ones. Let's start with employee as a data source. So this will extract, depending on your date range and employee that you choose, or if it's everybody, and specific location. This will extract everything about when someone was added to the system, when they were archived, who created them. It will pull every attribute that's tied to an employee, stress profile, pay rates, payroll ID, location they're assigned to, etc., etc. Dave, is there anything else to add to the employee source?
No, although I just want to highlight, I think there was a question earlier about whether or not we can get an address for an employee. That will come out on this object if you're looking for it.
Excellent. So the employee contact details as well will be there as well. So that's one. One thing I really do want to point out, though, is that there is a lot of history. You know, every modification, every movement in the system is recorded and can be extracted here. So if you want to make sure that you don't have hundreds of thousands of lines of data, do make sure you're looking at a very specific date range, or an individual or a single location or something like that. Just make sure that you're already quite drilled down before you export. The second one we'll take a look at is roster. So this is every activity on a scheduled shift. Who created the shift, when, and all of the changes, who deleted it. So that's a question that comes up quite often. One of my managers has deleted a shift. Can you find out who it was? Is that right, Dave? Will we cover that in the roster?
Correct. That'll all be there. So if you like, you'll see that there is a box at the bottom of the screen there that says include history. If you click that and export it, it will actually contain all of the changes that have happened for any given shift as well. So if an employee does come back with a dispute or just a general concern that shift times are changing, anything like that, you can click that box and it will give you everything you need to look into it.
Excellent. Thank you. So that's two, employee and roster. The third one is timesheet. So If you need the full detail of timesheet history on any one individual or location in a really specific date range, for example, a lot of our customers operate in particular countries that could be subject to company auditing. This will have every detail of every action. So Dave just mentioned the download history. Just to remind you to be careful, and this will be, if you include this is a full database rip of every single modification to the minute detail. So if you're choosing all employees, all locations, and a wide time frame, be careful, because that could give you hundreds of thousands of lines of data. So
yes, and just to jump in on that, guys, for the roster and timesheet elements in particular, you can actually see the changes in the UI rather than potentially coming back and outputting this. So just as a general rule, right, this is sort of the tool you would use if you have something like an audit going on and you need to get out a ton of data all at once. If you're just investigating something sort of as a one-off, you can find that in the UI if you need it.
Lovely stuff. And the last one is Memo, which is the newsfeed data. So we're acting as translators from Depu language to English here, but Memo is newsfeed data. So imagine, it's been 5 years of worth of newsfeed posts, and you want to find out what the Christmas party message was in 2017, whatever. You can very quickly get all of the newsfeed information out here and do a very quick search in the CSV. So there we go. So as I say, I shall link to how you can get access to the Deputy Exporter. Although technically, you can just go to help.deputy.com and just search for it, and you'll find the help guide and the link to the tool there as well. Now, let's go back to my slide. Wrong slide, Gary, but this is the right slide. It's 10 minutes to. I do have a poll. Now, before I launch the poll and ask you a question to help us out, just a bit of feedback for future training. Dave, was there any questions? I saw you've answered loads, which has been amazingly helpful. Thank you. But was there any questions outstanding that you maybe wanted to cover now or in the...
Thank you, mate. Yeah, I think just in particular, guys, there have been a lot of questions coming through on things like, how do I handle my contracted hours? How do I handle things like overtime or night rates? All of that. So we can report out on those. However, to do that, we need to build them into the system first, which is usually a process of custom configuration. So absolutely something that we can do. I suggest if you do want to do that, reach out to our support team at experience@deputy.com. We'll have that email in the follow-up as well. And they can point you in the right direction, which more than likely will probably be me anyway, but it is possible.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah. So quite often a lot of the questions require a bit more context, and it's really the answer is going to be it depends on your specific rules. So as Dave said, I will link the email address for you to make requests for any custom configurations that you might need. That will indeed come with the follow-up to the webinar. Now it's poll time. So I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to launch the poll in just a second. It's multiple choice, so you can answer just one, or you can answer all of them, or a couple of your favorites. What would you find to be the easiest and most valuable method of learning the Deputy platform? So PDF articles that you can download, share and print, a dedicated learning platform, so something separate to Deputy that has your own login with step-by-step video training guides to take you through. Thirdly, an interactive live group video call with your peers, so perhaps a small selection of customers in a similar industry or peer group that can all interact collectively and discuss the platform tips and tricks with each other. And finally, an in-product selection of interactive guides. So as you are in the system, links and guides, video guides within the Deputy platform itself to guide you through. All right, so let me launch that poll now. And please take it away. I'll be really, really keen to see your answers. Now, I don't know if you can actually see this, But thank you so much. Wow. Okay, that's great. Now, just over half of you have voted, which is great. It's going up. It's going up. The leader at the moment is the dedicated learning platform, which is very exciting, and it's actually the answer I want to hear personally. Secondly, it's close between in product and PDF articles. Now, I completely understand that people still very much like the tangible PDF that you could download and share and perhaps have on your desk and go through. And absolutely, we still write PDF guides. So we've got 72% now have voted. So I'll just give this an extra 20-30 seconds. We've just got 5 minutes left. So if you haven't voted on the poll yet, please do put one or a couple of answers that you identify with. It'll be really, really helpful for us to make sure that we are providing the content and delivering it in the way that you find easiest and most accessible to learn and progress with. All right, 3/4 of you have now voted. So there's about 30 or so people who haven't yet. So please do. If we can get it to 80%, I'll be happy and I'll stop talking and you can go about your days. Jim says not had a poll. Oh, can you not see it on the screen? People have voted. Okay, Jim. Well, you can always just write in the chat box there if you've got a preference as to how you like to learn Deputy. But the clear winners, 63% are going with the dedicated learning platform. And then it's a close tie between the tangible, the physical PDF articles that I can download, share and print, and the in-product interactive guides. 81% have now voted. Okay, thank you so much. That's excellent. That's really, really insightful for us. I'm going to do a quick screen grab because the last time I did this poll, Zoom did not record it for some reason. It was very annoying. So I think that's worked. Just wait for my screen grab to confirm. Yes, good. All right. That's it from me, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to end that poll there. Thank you so much. Oh, I can actually share the results of the poll. Okay, that's good. I'll add that to the follow-up as well. Yes, that's it from myself and Dave. Thank you, Dave, for all your wonderful help. He's answered over 50 questions in the time of this video, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you, mate. That's brilliant. I really hope you guys have got plenty from this, and it's given you at least some ideas as to how you can implement some of these more customized reports with your own data. As I say, if there's any questions that didn't get answered that we can indeed answer, that maybe just might take a bit longer and a bit of a conversation, then we will get back to you individually. So don't worry, everything's been documented, excuse me. So yes, thank you again. I shall be seeing you next month for the Christmas special. More on that coming soon. But for now, that's it from me. Have a great rest of the day. Cheers.